Hello, welcome back. It's the first true episode of Melville's Marginalia, where I will be delving as much as I can in a short amount of time through some of what Melville wrote in his books, whether they are check marks, X's, underlines, and occasionally funny little anecdotes and notes. Today, for the first episode, I wanted to go over the Bible because the Bible is, well, I'm going to let another critic kind of more or less say what I would say, but they say it better. This is Herschel Parker, preeminent Melville scholar, biographer. At the end of Moby-Dick, in the Norton edition, there's a great resource called Melville's Reading in Moby-Dick, which includes a really helpful bibliography. I don't even know if that's visible, but there's a helpful bibliography at the end. And he says at this one point, the book he wrote in the year and a half after reaching home at the beginning of February 1850, that's Moby Dick, would be pervasively influenced by Shakespeare's plays. It would also be pervasively influenced by the Bible, in particular the book of Job, which provided an analog for Ahab's quarrel with God, and the book of Jonah, to which provided an analog for Ishmael's less defiant method of coming to terms with the universe. Melville had never stopped reading the Bible, usually in the King James Version, and the language of Moby Dick is suffused with echoes of the long, familiar Bible and the freshly absorbed or reabsorbed Shakespeare. The Bible and Shakespeare shaped the language and psychology The Bible and Shakespeare shaped the language and psychology of Moby Dick. So, Melville and his Bible, they were very close. Now, the version of Melville's Bible on the Marginalia, which I'm going to pull up here, it's under B, and you can see here Testament and Psalms. That would be the New Testament and Psalms. I don't see, and maybe I'm just really bad at navigating the website, but I've been using it for a couple of years now. I don't see any Old Testament Marginalia, but we know, especially just as a 19th century American, Melville read the whole Bible sporadically throughout his life. I don't want to say too much about Melville because this is really more about his Marginalia, but I will say he had a fascinating religious upbringing. His father was a Universalist, which would have been considered, in our terms, a more liberal left version of Christianity. However, his mother was a very strict Presbyterian, and he wrestled his whole life with the dichotomy of the influence of his father and the influence of his mother. He married a woman who was a Universalist, but he had problems with Universalism. But he had equal problems with the more conservative varieties of Christianity, and so he was constantly stuck in the middle. He never really found, as far as I can tell, even in his late life with Clairol, he never really found the religious balance he was searching for. He was always kind of stuck with those dichotomies. Let me take a sip of coffee real quick before we get started. If you click on the Testament and Psalms here, you can get a little more information about it. This is a weird book that he owns because he gets it in around 1846. You can see up here, which is pretty early. If you're wondering, that's 5 years before Moby Dick is published. It seems that he read it for a long time. Apparently, he took it on a journey in 1860, which would have been 3 years after his last novel. So Melville had this copy for a while. And so when it comes to looking at where or when the Marginalia was made, it's nearly impossible to tell. But as Herschel Parker notes, he read the Bible throughout his whole life. The Bible is an influence on every single work Melville ever wrote. I can't think of one where some aspect of the Bible doesn't play a part. Of course, Moby Dick is the most biblically influenced. So it helps us read Moby-Dick, but I think Clairol is also important in this regard. So let's go ahead and look at this bad boy. I don't really know where to start. There's a lot. This is one of the books where there's a lot of marginalia. I think it'd be interesting to look at the book of Revelation first for a few reasons. One, the book of Revelation is, if you're familiar with the Bible, it's a bit of a wonky book in terms of it's pretty bizarre and strange. And Melville himself often writes bizarre and strange. Over here, you can see that it tells you where things are marked, and it tells you where they're annotated. So here we have, for example, since we've never done this together, 418 marked. So you click on it, and it will automatically load, and then we can see here, what is it he marked? He marked in Revelation, what chapter is this? Chapter 7, or no, sorry. I gotta work on my Roman numerals. Chapter 12, verse 14. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. All right, right off the bat, I can see why Melville highlighted this passage. You don't need to know the context of what's even going on to know that a phrase like for a time and times and half a time is very Melvillian. That is the type of sentence he would borrow all the time. He loves playing with the same word over and over again, multiple times in a sentence. This is something also he borrows from Thomas Browne. So Thomas Browne also uses this technique. If you're familiar with Melville's writing, you know that. He also is a big fan of the and, I'm forgetting what that device is called, but when you constantly use conjunctions instead of just ending a sentence. And that's something that they borrow from the King James, because the King James, oftentimes verses are, like, they should be multiple sentences or ideas, but they condense it. I love that. She is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. I can see why Melville would have marked that. Over here we got page 429. Something else marked. It's going to pull up. All right, so this is from chapter 21. I love these old Bibles have these like descriptions of what's going on. So, and they're in the left and right of the page. The description of the heavenly Jerusalem. Again, it's difficult to tell why Melville used certain marks. So is there a difference between him writing 2 marks next to a verse versus 1? I have no idea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these are words true and faithful. There's a great declarative quality to these sentences, and Melville himself loves the declarative. He loves saying, the first sentence of Moby-Dick, call me Ishmael, right? It's so direct, it's so declarative. The Bible is very similar. The Bible doesn't really beat around the bush in terms of like getting to things. So verse 2, and I, John, saw the holy city. It's like right away. There's no kind of preamble. There's no explanation, which is ironic because I think a lot of people associate Moby-Dick with digression, which makes sense, and also kind of like beating around the bush. But it's actually a very declarative book. If you read through Moby-Dick, even the longer essays like Whiteness of the Whale, he kind of just says things, and he doesn't often feel the need to entirely back them up. He'll just say, like, albinos terrify people. And it's like, oh, okay. And there's no like explanation other than the whiteness, which, Melville, obviously, member of the 19th century. But I also think we're getting a bit more of Melville's kind of emotional side here. He sees God as someone who will wipe away all the tears, no more death, sorrow, crying, any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Melville himself, for the unfamiliar, was a very depressed person. And I mean like depressed and you could almost call it like manic depression, periods of high highs and periods of low lows. But really after his career, it was mostly lows. When it comes to his religious views, one of the things, and I talk about this in my thesis, if you ever want to read it, ask for that link, is he was constantly searching for this balance between, again, what his parents had, the universalism and the rigor of Presbyterianism. He thought that universalism was kind of cheap. Like, well, what's the point of living if everyone just like gets off free? Like, this whole world's kind of useless. But he thought that Presbyterianism and the more conservative branches of Christianity were perverting the message of love and kindness of the Bible. And he never reconciled this, as I said before. But he did have a genuine love, hope, and desire for peace and love. Like, I don't think you can doubt that. So I think covering these sentences, I think there is some of that language, the declarative language, but I think this might also be more of a genuine portrait of the things Melville was concerned with. He's marking this because it's encouraging to him. Again, we'll never actually know. That's just my interpretation. I got to stop qualifying. I'm just going to qualify once and for all. We don't know with a lot of these things. We just don't know. All right, so the next, some interesting stuff. He put an X here. Usually when there's an X, that means it just seems as if he thought it was extra important. And again, if you think about your own marginalia, if I open my books, even my copy of Moby-Dick here, I have some notes and I'm just like, why did I put an X there? I don't know. Melville puts an X though next to this section, which is a weird section. It's just like a description of the city and like what it's made of. Looking at verse 20, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth sargus, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl. It's like all this material. I almost wonder if Melville highlighted this because he thought that the names were funny. That's kind of what I would imagine. Or not that they're funny, but that they're unique. You don't hear very often chalcedony or sardonyx, you know. It is funny, though, that sardonyx sounds like sardonic, which is something he'd be interested in. Yeah, I don't really know why he would have highlighted this. But he seems interested in the city and what it's made of. And again, this could come back more to his personal religious views. He could be like genuinely thinking, what will the afterlife look like? And he's looking at this and he's like, what is this telling me? Verse 23, and the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon to shine in it. For the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. That's a mysterious passage. You know, that's just like a mysterious, very romantic passage, even, I'd say. That's the kind of thing I think Melville would just find attractive. That imagery of the afterlife, there is no sun, there is no moon, there's just God. You know, I could see him being interested in that. Now, I know there's something funny in in Revelation here I wanted to get to. It's like near the very end. So this is, for those of you who are unfamiliar, this is when John is he's wrapping up the book and he's saying, I'll just read it. Verse 18 and 19. For I testify unto every man that heareth the words of the prophecy of this book. If any man shall add unto these things, God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. There are a lot of bad plagues. And if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life and out of the holy city and from the things which are written in this book. Now here's what's funny. According to Melville's Marginalia, and you can see it. I don't know if I can zoom in. Oh, I can zoom in a little bit. Melville put an X and crossed out the words in this section. So the part of the book that says, don't take any parts out of this book, Melville crossed out. which is a total act of blasphemy, and he would have completely known it. Although I think he didn't do it out of a spirit of mean blasphemy. Again, we have to remember Melville's not like an edgy, Reddit tier atheist. He's a very smart and also very frustrated man. He's also a guy with a great sense of humor, if you've read any of his books. So he probably crossed it out to be silly. Here's the other weird thing. He wrote something down here and then someone cut it out. Now, there's a lot of controversy as to who might have cut things out, because there's multiple instances of this where people cut things out of Melville's Marginalia. Everyone's got their opinions. Some think it's his his children's children and the nephews and whatnot. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if this section in particular Melville cut out. What he wrote at the bottom, I don't know, but it must have been something blasphemous. The fact that it's erased strikes me as, honestly, I think he probably erased it. Again, he was kind of a manic person. He was this way and that way. He was super religious or super inflected with religious sentiment, and then he was also like desperate in hatred for all things Christian. And I went between the two. If I had to guess, I would say Melville felt bad about what he did and erased it. This is a man who was like genuinely worried for the sake of his soul, even if he didn't always express it. But he was deeply concerned with religion and truth his whole life. So I wouldn't be surprised personally if whatever, or the markings on verse 19, the crossing out, if he himself erased it. As to what he wrote at the bottom and who cut it out, I have no idea. But I think that's also a hilariously Melvillian thing to do, to take the book, and because Melville in a way is a bit of a, proto-postmodernist, he's self-referential, he likes to mess with the idea of reading a book. And so I think for him, finding a verse that says don't take anything from this and then proceeding to take something from it by crossing it out, he probably just thought was really funny. Or he was really frustrated. It's difficult to say. But what's at the bottom, we'll never know. There are so many books in Melville's Bible, but there's also so few actual annotations. There's a lot that's going to be just, marks. But if we hop on over to Romans, we have more erased margin notes. You can't even see them. It's like super slight. He wrote something. They try to translate it. They think it says the N blank blank work, but what then? Like, what's going on there? I don't know. Might be worth looking at the book of James. James is one of the most important books for Melville because it was a book of defiance, the epistle of straw, as Martin Luther called it. A lot of Presbyterians hated the book of James. Universalists also didn't like the book of James, and we'll see why. But Melville loved the book of James. And we'll see why. He makes a note here. Sorry, my cat just found a toy. You can't have that. A new toy, not even opened, that we purchased for him. I'm sorry, buddy. I need to open this for you. Gotta make this video, though. So if you look at here, verse 14, in the book of James, it says, "What doth it profit, my brethren, though a man say he have faith and have not works, can faith save him?" Melville marks it and puts a check. Melville was, I would say, someone very concerned with justice, but often had a hard time formulating opinions about justice. But he knew he needed to be kind and loving. He likes the book of James because this is counter to Paul. Those familiar with Paul, he says you don't need works to be saved. James, however, says you need works, you need to do good things in order to be saved because they are markers of your faith. Melville finds this verse, checks it, because I think for him it's significant. It means a lot to him. I think there's another passage. Yeah, up here, verse 18, it says, "Yea, a man may say, thou hast faith and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works, and I will show thee my faith by my works." And Melville again highlights it, puts a check. this means Melville cares a lot about it, I think. I don't think there's really much more to even say about it. It's unfortunate that he doesn't mark more of the book of James, to be honest, because there's such beautiful language that I would wager he borrows from. Let's take a look at one of the Gospels. There's a few. And I'll just kind of highlight to the ones that are annotated because I think that's, what people are interested in. Oh boy, another one of these. He marks this thing about Jesus having authority. Why? I don't know. Bottom annotation cut out. What a disappointment. Who cut it out? I don't know. Might have been him. Might have been a long-lost nephew. Here we go. Melville highlights this whole passage about Jesus being asked who's his mother and brother. Or sorry, I'm getting the story all wrong. I'll just read it. Then one said unto him, Jesus, behold, thy mother and thy brethren stand without, desiring to speak with thee. But he answered and said unto him that told him, who is my mother, and who are my brethren? And he stretched forth his hand toward his disciples, and said, behold, my mother and my brethren. For whoever shall do the will of my Father, which is in heaven, the same is my brother and sister and mother. This is very much that kind of universalist spirit, I think, of like we're all one, showing up in Melville. But he's got a little notation here with his lovely little handwriting. The same day went Jesus out of the house and sat by the seaside, and great multitudes were gathered together unto him, so that he went into a ship and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore. And then Melville writes to the side, the sea. Not very significant, but again, when I think about my own annotations, he's just excited about the ocean. He's excited about that ocean representation in the Bible. And I salute that. I'll drink to that. Melville, again, he's looking through the Bible, whether or not this is written after Moby-Dick or before, we don't know. But he's looking for things in the Bible that are reflective of the kind of things he wants to do in his writing. And so that's what we end up with. Let's go ahead and look at one more. We'll just pick a book at random, see if there's anything good. Good old 1 Corinthians. There's got to be something good in 1 Corinthians. Oh boy. We got a big erased thing. Where is it? Bottom margin erased. Yeah, okay, that's not helpful. We have no idea what he says. Maybe not Corinthians. What's going on in Galatians? Oh, here we go. Melville with the millennial dialect. I love it. Paul in Galatians says, and I went up by revelation and communicated unto them that gospel which I preach among the Gentiles, but privately to them which were of reputation, lest by any means I should run or had run in vain. But neither Titus, who was with me, being a Greek, was compelled to be circumcised. Am I missing something? Is that not the verse? It says somewhere on this page that Melville wrote true, but I don't see it. Oh, erased annotation for 1, 2 to 3. I do not see it. But apparently somewhere on this page he just wrote true. And it looks like he wrote it for... Oh, it must be actually up here. Oh, I see it. Okay, yeah, it's very faint. There it is. Okay, so the thing he actually said true about had nothing to do with circumcision. It says, for if I yet pleased men, I should not be the servant of Christ. And he wrote true. Melville's misanthropy coming through. What can I say? Melville's very attracted to these passages where it says, like, you don't need to please other people, you just got to please God, which is ironic because we also had the passages about, faith over works. Why Melville erased it, I don't know. Or why a family member would erase it, I don't know. It's not blasphemous, I don't think, to agree with Galatians. But the Bible is obviously a very contentious book, so there's going to be a lot of especially if people related to him later down the line find it, they're probably going to try and get rid of as much as they can. But also, I think he himself would have gotten rid of stuff. Looking around, clicking on these, a lot of unmarked stuff. Thank God he didn't mark Timothy. We can thank him for that later. What would he have annotated in Titus? One of themselves, even a prophet of their own, said, "The Cretians are always liars, evil beasts, slow bellies." I mean, he probably marked this because... Why did he mark this? I mean, he probably thinks it's funny, that kind of thing. There's also a mark at the bottom that says Epimenides. All right, I'm going to be honest. I don't know who Epimenides is off the top of my head. Let me Google this. Epidermis. No, wait. Am I spelling it wrong? Epimenides. Okay. Epimenides. Fire emblem. What the hell? A semi-mythical 7th or 6th century Greek seer and philosopher poet. What? Epimenides is quoted twice in the New Testament. All right, this is truly bizarre. I had no idea about this. See, this is the kind of fascinating thing you learn about when you hop in here. All right, apparently there's something in the Acts of the Apostles 17:28, the hymn to Zeus. Oh, wait. Okay, there's something in Wikipedia here. Wikipedia, I don't know if it's a good source or not. The second line is quoted with a veiled attribution, a prophet of their own in the epistle to Titus, to warn Titus about the Cretians. The prophet in Titus 1:12 is identified by Clement of Alexandria as Epimenides. What? Okay, well this is fascinating. This is like, I'm learning something new, and it's like, Melville, okay, so he highlights prophet. One of themselves, even a prophet. The Cretians are always liars, evil beasts, slow bellies. So Melville must have been interested in these ancient Greek sages for some reason. Where is he getting the information that this is Epimenides? Again, this is obscure stuff. So he must have had either some kind of commentary, or he was reading, who was the prophet again? Or no, Clement of Alexandria. He must have been reading Clement of Alexandria or something. Or maybe he went to a sermon and someone said something. That is bizarre. But again, a reason why we should read Melville's Marginalia. And why is he interested in a prophet? Read Moby-Dick again. Read Clairol again. Heck, read Pierre again. The weird prophet sages. Melville loves that whole thing. And so he's probably, I could view this as him looking at different types of prophets, different types of sages, and trying to figure out what it is that makes a prophet and a sage. And I think perhaps he likes this prophet because this prophet's also a poet. And he's very blunt. The Cretians are always liars, evil beasts, and slow bellies. That's bizarre. I think this is a good place to end, though. There's so much more to look through. There's probably so much more gold, but this is just a few things I wanted to hit on. So, hope you enjoyed. Not sure what we'll go through next time, honestly. Maybe I'll go through the Bible a bit more, or I might go through some of Shakespeare if they have it on here, because that is the other kind of key literary influence. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. Take it easy.